Hello and welcome to the Back Row on Air Sport. It is European Cup final week, and joining me to look ahead are Brendan O'Brien of the Irish Examiner and Brendan Fanning of the Sunday Independent. We're going to get to that really exciting game in part two, but first of all, Brendan, Munster couldn't let Leinster have this week. They had to get a few headlines, and not good headlines. Jerry Flannery and Felix Jones leaving the province at the end of this season. It's bad news.
It's bad news and it's terrible timing. Like you say, we're in playoff rugby at the moment. You'd expect everybody to be concentrating on that. It's part of a pattern with Munster. They've just failed miserably to get any stability on their coaching staff for a number of years now, for some reasons beyond their control, obviously. We're 6 weeks away or so from pre-season, and we're at a situation now where they don't know who their staff is going to be. They're left, whenever their season ends, with 2 senior coaches on their staff. We could have a situation come the end of the year where we won't have any Munster representation in that senior staff for what I believe will be the first time in the professional era or any era. It's terrible news for them. It just sets them back again. There's this impression with Munster, they take a step forward and a step back comes again. So where to go from here is a big question.
Brendan, Munster statement was interesting reading. Acting CEO Philip Quinn said, "We believe the Professional Game Board made every effort to retain the coaching duo with competitive terms." So there were offers there. How have we got to this situation where now Munster, as Brendan says, are going into a new season with just 2 coaches in place?
I'd have a wee bit of sympathy for them in terms of the lack of stability, because they looked to have nailed it down when they got Rassie Erasmus, and then, if you remember, Rassie was telling everybody who'd listened, no, I'm staying, I love Munster, it's fantastic, it's all going great. And then Rassie changed his tune and in fact was going back to South Africa. And Munster were actually backpedaling ever since then. They picked up Johan van Graan on Rassie's recommendation. Had Jerry Flannery and Felix in place, it wasn't too long, I think, before the issue of Munster needing to be more creative in attack became quite a serious issue, and they haven't dealt with it. Now, I'd have my suspicions, as anybody in this business does. Leaks don't happen, just by accident. The information coming into the public domain about Rob Howley having been spoken to, the second that made it into the public domain, the game changed for Felix Jones. Whether he had the offer or he didn't, I think it was pretty obvious that he was in trouble. And I think, to be honest, that information getting into the public domain probably suited Munster. Yeah.
Is that the sense of that kind of made the decision for Felix Jones? And how does Flannery fit into that? What's the sense around that? Because clearly he was rated, the scrum was going really well in particular, and learning his trade on the job. What's the sense of how he was tied up in Jones's?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Flannery thing just seems to have come from nowhere. I can take your point on that, Brendan, about Felix Jones. It was hard to see where he would fit in a restructured coaching staff. If you had somebody above him, there was talk in one of the papers today about Rob Howley maybe taking on a senior coach role similar to Stuart Lancaster. So that isn't a surprise. But the Flannery thing, I don't know where that leaves him. To lose one coach at one time, you could say, is careless at this point of the season. To lose 2 at the same time is just disastrous news for them. You look at the point in the World Cup cycle we're at. If they get somebody who is World Cup tied at the moment, you're looking at another season. It'll be a 4th season in a row where Munster could be going into a season without all their coaching staff, or with a change in coaching staff midway through it. We talked about pre-season there a minute ago. That's when all your strategies are done. That's when you lay out your plans for the season. What happens when a coach comes in November, or 2 coaches come in November? They're on the back foot already, and again we'll be at the back end of next season looking at Munster in April. Where are they with their attacking strategy? Where are they now with their forward pack, which you said has done quite well?
Yeah, it's a question of how far they let it go. We don't know yet with Jerry Flannery what his reasoning is. Himself and Felix were pretty tight. Did he have the hump about Felix being marginalised as he was by that information leak and the building publicity and the criticism over the poor attack play? Now, I think they're 2 different animals in that Felix appears to be a career coach, whereas Jerry Flannery has quite a few things going on in the background, other business interests. He may well be at a point in his life where he says, you know what, I don't need this anymore. That part of my life is done for now. I'm going to go off and pursue other interests. We just don't know. But one question with the timing is shocking. It is the last time in the world you want to be going looking for a coach is now. Or, sorry, 2 coaches.
Yeah, and there is some sympathy there for Munster, but it just seems insane that you can get to this stage of the season without having... why was Flannery not under more pressure earlier in the season to sign a new contract?
Well, it almost seems negligent. I mean, we've spoken to players in the start of Six Nations. I remember speaking to Rob Kearney a few years ago, about his contract, which was due up that summer, and asking him, Rob, how's it going? And this isn't an ideal time. It's very late in the season. And he was thinking, yeah, this is the chairman of the Irish players, obviously. That's a player, and that's late January. Here we are in mid-May, and we're none the wiser as to what the coaching staff will be for Munster. Like, you do have sympathy for some dominoes the way they've fallen for them, but this should have been wrapped up in December, January, particularly with the fact that the World Cup is coming up in mind. It's not a good time in the cycle, and May before a World Cup in September is the worst point in the cycle.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. The fact that the CEO situation is fairly fluid, that really doesn't help either.
Yeah.
Garrett Fitz is away for how long, we don't know, and a stand-in is a stand-in as such. So, yeah, it certainly would help if you had certainty around that position.
Yeah. So what does Johan van Graan do now? He signed his new contract. He thought he was going to have, ideally, both these guys in place. Now he's got nothing confirmed or in line for next season. Where does he go next?
Okay, well, he rings Rob Howley up again, or my understanding is they're also talking to somebody, a current attack coach in one of the Premiership sides. So if neither of those things work out, I'd be banging Prendergast's door down in Barras and saying...
Mike Prendergast.
Sorry, beg your pardon, Mike Prendergast, and saying, how are you fixed? Now, if you think of it, Mike Prendergast, it's kind of ironic, he's operating under one South African, Heineke Meyer in Paris, who wouldn't allow you to run the ball within sight of your own posts. And I would have seen Johan van Graan as Heineke Light, and he did come from that school originally.
Yeah.
And I suspect he could be actually a very good fit. Whether that fit is feasible now in the short time frame and contracts and yada yada.
But that's the thing as well, we're talking about Munster as well. Where do they go? The Munster of old, the noughties, the need for a more expansive style as well. You want to have the luxury of maybe a panoramic view. Where do we want to go? And have this sat down and talk about how we go forward from the Saracens semi-final. We're continuously hitting a brick wall. But now you find yourself constrained by availability and a very short period of time. You're up against the black ball when you're looking for something that should be really, really long term.
Well, you're dead right about the Saracens semi-final being a kind of a watershed. The bit that I cannot get my head around is the number of people I talk to in and around that team who say, it's an evolutionary thing, moving away from the style of rugby that won us European titles in 2006 and 2008, and the complete shift in personnel. If you want to get away to that and get away to a different game, it takes a lot of time. Well, I seem to remember Rob Penny going in there, and in the blink of an eye, he changed completely the way they were playing. Now, he went from north-south to east-west, and that clearly didn't work. But surely there has to be a happy ground, a happy medium in between the two approaches. And I can't believe how professional athletes, a lot of them very talented, and lots of people who know their rugby, cannot nail this one down, how it's still dragging on and on and on. And now the whole thing is exacerbated by the level of movement at the coaching level.
Yeah, it's not ideal. Is there potentially opportunity in the chaos that an unexpected move like this, and another one, actually allows them to make a greater shift potentially, certainly with the attack?
Yeah, I mean, if they get the appointments right, there is. I mean, you look at the two lads who are leaving, they've 9 years experience on the coaching staff between them. That's a fair shift, 4 and 5 years for anybody in rugby or any team sports. There was talk, obviously, like we said, of Felix leaving anyway. So that was going to change. So there is definitely opportunity there. It's still there's a lot to be said for Munster. The academy is starting to do a little bit better than a couple of years ago, and it was Spot the Munster man in the Ireland under-20s. Great stadium, great facilities, great support. There's a lot going on there.
And a good squad.
And the squad, some world-class players as well.
Best squad they've had in a long time.
Yeah, so there's a lot of potential there for somebody to comes in, but they're just backs against the wall now, trying to get a quick-fire appointment that serves their immediate purposes and allows them to expand their game and get beyond the semi-finals or the finals of a Pro 14.
Yeah, Brendan's mentioned the lack now of homegrown coaches. Is that important in Munster, do you think, that they get someone who's attached to the province, who has a history there, or is actually maybe a good thing to depart from that?
It's an interesting point. In pro sport, basically it's whoever the talented people are, you go and recruit them and you pay them whatever they demand. That's the way it works. But Munster, I'd say the marketing people in Munster specifically have been trading on the Munster ethic, the identity, all of that. Now, it's possible to have people coming in and buying into what the locals are telling them, but if the number of buy-ins suddenly outnumber the locals, then it's hard to get that message across. I think it does matter, even though it is a professional game, it is an emotion-driven game, And yeah, that is a selling point for Munster, who we are and you know, their history. So it is harder to maintain that the further abroad you go to bring people in. But just to expand on Bren's point, not only are they going to struggle to fill coaching spots now, if you're a player and you're coming on the market, you're looking at Munster and you're thinking, you know, this is not as attractive as it would have been a few years ago. Yeah,
that's a concern. Can Munster be better at managing these setbacks, I guess, PR-wise, to be a cynical kind of journalist about it? Can they actually create a better narrative around even things like this, a setback?
Yeah, the definite short answer is yes. I mean, it's only back in, is it October, November, they came out with the strategic plan for the best club in the world. Is it the right time to have done that at a point when you are struggling for stability on the coaching field in the back of 3 years? That's arguable as well. It's difficult from a PR sense to deal with it when you do get the unexpected dropping at times like this. You talked about possible leaks as well, Brent. That's going to happen in every organisation. They could do it being a little bit more front foot in how they deal with the media, getting out in front of stories. There's no doubt about that. But PR is really a reactionary game in a lot of ways as well. And if they keep having incidents like this where they're losing coaches, I mean, apparently the players didn't even know about this until yesterday. So if it's catching the players on the hop, it's catching PR people on the hop. What chance did they have?
Yeah, well, really interesting to see what happens. Thanks for your thoughts, guys. Well, join us after the break to look ahead to Leinster versus Saracens in the Heineken Champions Cup final in Newcastle.
Leinster are once again European champions. You have to applaud what they've built. Never write off Saracens.
Fasten your seatbelts, this is going to be an epic final.
Two Titanic teams going head to head. The chase is on. Look at this acceleration, the power. Ruthless, relentless. Saracens on the march. I will keep on running till I find my place.
Yeah, well, we cannot wait for that game. Going to be an absolute cracker this weekend. Brendan, there's so much to look forward to. Leinster Sarries finally in the final, the two best teams in Europe. What's the most exciting thing for you?
Well, before I get to that bit, the bit I won't say dreading, but the bit I would be concerned about is that the physical nature of the contest is going to be so full on and so accelerated and so intense that we may not actually, on the one hand, we may not get a great game. And on the other hand, we may have a whole load of people looking at this going, geez, is this a game we want our kids playing? Like, I was really struck by the demolition job that Saracens did on Munster. Munster were still competitive, and Munster did not play badly. But just the accuracy and non-stop aggression of Saracens in the semi-final against Munster, aided and abetted to a degree by the poor refereeing, was the most intense I've seen at any level this season. Now, clearly Leinster are not too shabby and have a decent record against Saracens. But it's funny the number of people you come across who have a bad feeling about this. A number of Leinster people who think they're going to be got on this one.
Yeah, it could be a traditional, and certainly that Pro 14 semi-final the weekend after could be a different team playing. Brent, what do you think this game's going to look like? Are we talking about a Six Nations kind of esque battle here?
Yeah, I think Brent's point is well made. The closer we get to the game, I think there is that reality of this is great, oh my God, this could be terribly great. And it kind of reminds me of last year in Bilbao with Leinster and Racing, the build-up to that. I mean, Racing aren't quite Saracens in European terms, but my God, what a team. Same thing, you're in a kind of a virgin territory for the European final as well, and all that entails, like you said, Bren, you know, expanding the game, spreading the gospel, and yet you look at last year and it spilled rain in Bilbao, and boy was it intense. 9 penalties, very little, you know, in the way of rugby that you would bring your non-rugby mate in and sit him down and say, here you go, what about this for a game? I think it will be like that. I think it'll be attritional. You know, we could very well be looking at Owen Farrell or Johnny Sexton to kick a penalty at the end of it again. Remember last year, Leinster only led for the last 90 seconds. It wouldn't surprise me again, but I kind of share your feeling as well, Bren. I'm a little bit worried in terms of Saracens.
Yeah, and very tough to call. It could go either way in a very narrow margin. From Leinster's point of view, what are the things they need to do well if they're going to come out on the right side of that?
Well, first of all, you would you'd have a lot of faith in Leinster's set piece, and I would continue to have faith in Leinster's set piece. Though the Sean Cronin situation is interesting. I wonder how fit, if he is going to toe the line, and if he does get there, how fit he's going to be. So Sarri's got after Munster's lineup pretty effectively. They will do two things to Leinster. They will put maximum pressure on Leinster's lineout, and they will treat Johnny Sexton the way they treated Tyler Blaendal, and they will time the lateness of their hits to such a degree that they're, oh ref, I got there as quick as I could, but he's constantly getting up off the ground. Now, Blaendal and Sexton are different animals. Blaendal is a much more relaxed, even-tempered type of bloke. Once Sexton gets into the heat of match day, he just becomes insanely competitive and has to pick up every slight that is thrown at him. So Leinster really needs to manage that, which is going to be extremely difficult for him, and the forward pack really need to manage their end of things.
And probably need guys around them to take a little bit of pressure off. You think Ringrose for Leinster, even Alex Good for Saracens, a great playmaker. But compare those two out half. Who's a better out half, Johnny Sexton or Owen Farrell?
Crikey, thanks for that one. Well, as one of the Leinster players, I think as Robbie Henshaw said today, well, Johnny's older. The inference being that he has that bit of extra experience, but like Owen Farrell's no babe in the woods. If you were to ask me to choose one, I would always go with Johnny Sexton. Maybe that's just a case of you always do favour your own, bit of familiarisation. Sexton hasn't had the best of seasons, but when all the doubts were on him for the Toulouse game, when we were just, all the focus was on him in a way that we haven't seen in a long, long time, maybe even since he came back from that concussion layoff when he was playing in France, and the French and Six Nations that year targeted him and he came through it brilliantly. The guy came out, he produced when it mattered. He's a big game player, as are all the Leinster players. So I'd go with Johnny Sexton. But, you know, there's just so much more than the Sexton and Farrell axis in this game. And everybody in Leinster, it's amazing how unified that message has been this week. Oh, you know, there's matchups all over the pitch, Stuart Lancaster in particular. I'm particularly intrigued in how the Saracens aerial game goes again. I mean, they destroyed Mike Haley on it in the semi-final. Will they target the likes of Larmour and Jordan and James Lowe this time? There's going to be a lot in that. Robbie Henshaw talking about breaking ball this week in his old GA days playing for Athlone. So there's a lot of different elements in this. You know, you could simplify it by, you know, Leinster can grind teams out 40, 50 phases. Saracens aerial game, domestic and make of the rucks, the referee. But there's so many elements. I mean, even look at Saracens, nobody likes them, we don't care, they wear black. But they've got, even in the back line, the likes of Lazowski, who's played a lot of 10, who can do stuff you've mentioned, and, you know, Good at back. Yeah. They've got a lot of guys who can work at left or right. It's not just all about Owen Farrell.
Good is critical in that regard, and that's something that Leinster don't have. They don't really have. Well, they have Ringrose is a quality footballer, obviously, but he's playing it outside centre, and they don't get him into that second playmaking role in the way that Sarries do with Good, and Good did untold damage to Munster in the semi-final. And just to go back to the Sexton Farrell one, they are significantly different individuals, but I think they were inseparable in terms of their quality. And the Lions told us, you pick the two of them, you find a way. Though I would have enormous respect for Farrell. He's on the edge all the time, and he's the type of bloke you'd be very keen to have him in your team.
Yeah, two big defensive tens. Up front is going to be riveting battle. Itoje Ryan has been a kind of theme over the last couple of years, two emerging forces in the second row. How do you see those packs matching up?
Yeah, pretty evenly. It's hard to see a differential in it, really. I think good point in Sean Cronin as well. You know, his fitness is going to be pretty crucial. Interesting with Leinster, do they go with Fardy or Ruddock in the back row? Fardy played there last year. Sean O'Brien's kind of re-emergence finally from you know, a period of poor form and injury could be crucial, and maybe that'll make the decision for Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster, and you really need those guys to give a good performance. Rhys Ruddock is one of my favourite players. I've so much time for him, great lad, and yet he constantly seems to miss out on it, and I wonder will he miss out on it again, because Scott Fardy, we saw him in Bilbao last year, was crucial in the back row. He played all season at lock for Leinster, and yet when push came to shove, you know, injuries did dictate it. Fardy went into the back row, and he's not a guy I'd like to leave out. Yeah,
you look for ways to break the game, I suppose, and James Lowe is probably the first name that comes to mind. Is he good enough to open up a game like this?
Absolutely, and we were talking about putting the ball up to the back three. Lowe can deal with that, and if you get it wrong, you're in trouble, both in terms of the way he can attack you over the ground, And people forget just the quality of his kicking game. Like he was, in fairness to Leinster, if you look at Fardy and Lowe and Gibson Park, they don't get that much wrong in their recruitment policy. And obviously you're not going to have 3 of those on duty, but certainly 2 of them will be, and Lowe and Fardy are just top of the range.
Lowe's critical, really, isn't he? I mean, we've seen him as a game breaker. You know, he's the most potent try scorer in Irish rugby. I worked out the stats in one of my nerdy moments today. He's a try every 1.3 games or something.
Wow.
Keith Earls is quite close to him now, in fairness, in the last 2 seasons. But we've seen time and again that try against Toulouse. What other winger in Ireland would have scored that?
Yeah, the physical power allied to all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Just going back to Sarries for a second, and we were talking about Cronin and fitness. Michael Rhodes, he's not 100% by any means. And man, was he impressive in the semi-final. And he's had a really, really good season for them.
Yeah.
I'd say Leinster would love to see him out of the picture.
He did a conference call the other day, actually, and he was coming from the physio. He was delayed. He was in the physio room, so they'll be hoping he's all right. In terms of Sarries, though, Mark McCall is the figurehead. You know, you talk about having a strong leader and Munster trying to figure out their staff, but he seems to have got together a really settled, consistent coaching team, and he's the brains behind everything. Like, do you remember his time in Ireland particularly well? Were the signs there that he was going to turn into this kind of multiple winner? I
don't. I think Brendan's probably much better. He's probably a little bit before my time in before my time in the rugby beat.
Very diplomatic.
No. Before my time in the rugby beat, and it's actually I would be very interested.
Yeah.
Like
I remember going up to interview him one night in Bangor.
Yeah. And
he was still living in that's where he's from, in that general neck of the woods. And he interviewed him in a nice little cosy pub there one evening, and early enough in his Ulster career. And Roger Wilson and all of those guys were just coming through in the Ulster team. And he was kind of looking into the future thinking, it'll be great to hang around with these fellas for a long time now. They're going to be a really, really good, strong Ulster team. Great things are going to happen. A couple of years later, it went sour, quite sour. And he got a hard time off the fans. Took himself off, and talk about reinventing himself. He has done an absolutely first-class job at Saracens. Now, it clearly is easier if you're dealing off the resources that Saracens have, and they have been massive loss makers year after year because of the amount of loot that they've thrown at it. And it's not just the on-the-field stuff, it's the off-the-field stuff. And I always remember one anecdote about a fitness coach who they were recruiting from this general neck of the woods, and all the ancillary stuff was put in place to help him make the transition. So he had kids, so no, we can sort the creche, we can sort this, we can sort that. Look, all you need to worry about is turning up at this time every day, and this is what we'll be doing. You know, we look after everything else. So that whole Saracens family thing is something that they have spent huge time on perfecting, and you'd have to give credit to Mark McCall for that.
Yeah, and you look at the progression they've made in Europe as well. They didn't just spring up overnight. This isn't 3 years of Toulon Galacticos. Like, they've got a good solid bunch of some of those players like Cruz and Farrell who've come through the academy. McCall has been there, the steady hand on the tiller. You've mentioned the brilliant coaching staff he's had there, and it's been a very, very productive progression all the way through quarterfinals, semi-finals, losing in, was it 2014 to Toulon?
Yeah.
They've built and built and built, and the solidity in that team, I think there's 10 of the team that featured against Toulon in that final who played against Munster. That's a phenomenal rate of players for that period of time. Only 5 years, but we know the attrition rate in rugby. I looked at the Leinster team that lost to Toulon in the quarter-final that year, and only 5 of them will probably feature. So that's half the team. It's an amazing ability that they've had to hold on to. And these are key players we're talking about, the likes of Owen Farrell. So it's no surprise that they've stayed this good this long.
Last year's quarter-final, obviously, is our most recent reference point for these teams, Ben, but it's going to be a very, very different game. Talk us through how you see this unfolding. So.
Well, it's funny that we all expect it to be such a vastly different game after such a short period of time. And there hasn't been that much of a shift in personnel. But look, I don't know what degree of feedback Jerome Garces got back after the Munster game. And we were discussing earlier on how difficult it is to make the point when you're talking about a team that's just lost and you're pointing out the fact that they were the victims of bad refereeing decisions. It just gets washed away on the idea that you're moaning and whinging or whatever, even though we're not from Munster. Well, I'm not. No. But nevertheless, I think Garces had a shocker, and those who analysed it and shared it with via social media, there were lots of cut and dried examples of him having made bad decisions, which had a fundamental impact on the game. So, Lancaster's been around the block, Leo Cullen's been around the block. I would be making really strong representations to the referee before the game to put him under pressure, that he has a responsibility in this as well. And if he gives them a fair shake, they've every chance.
It's a good point. So just on that, I mean, we're in, like we say, Newcastle, like Bilbao last year. A lot of people looking in one rugby game a year. This will be it. The offside line is going to be a mess. The ruck is going to be a mess. People are going to be looking at it. We've heard rugby is a game of rules. Yeah. What is going on? Going to be very interesting to see how it unfolds.
Sean Garcia is the key man. Should be interesting, guys. Well, just a reminder that you can watch Leinster versus Saracens in the Heineken Champions Cup final on Saturday from 4 p.m. on BT Sport 2. My thanks to Brendan and Brendan. We'll be back in 3 weeks' time, but that's all for now from the back row. Catch you soon.